Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the LOL Pro League. My name is Rapid, and we're about to get into our second game of the night. Of course, game number one, fairly dominant performance by Hard Random, and while they were the favorites going into the game, Renaissance put up a decent fight, especially coming in towards the later, or the middle phase of it, where it took a dragon. It looked like there was some hope, but of course, a good performance by Hard Random, and they picked up the first win of the night, of course, versus Renaissance. Now Renaissance have to face off here against Virtus.Pro, and now Virtus.Pro, probably one of, if not the strongest team in CIS. Maybe Roxkiss now with their Alex Ish roster, maybe putting together a very strong CIS roster, but by and large, Virtus.Pro, they actually have names that you've probably heard of before, even maybe outside of the CIS scene. So, of course, Power of Dreams, Mirror End, Pieter Pokier, Vincent Vega, and big fan of Vincent Vega, and Liquid, of course. He kept his name instead of changing it. But on the other side, these are the guys from Renaissance that you saw in the last game: Hedon, Clover, Slayer, Death Knight, and Tiki. Now, for Virtus.Pro, they have a very different style, at least I feel like, apart from other CIS teams. And where other teams are content to like sit in the lane phase for maybe 10-15 minutes and then, you know, start their team fighting at a dragon, Virtus.Pro are actually one of the only teams that, at least previously, can't remember what it was in Star Ladder last season, in the Star Ladder finals, and even though they didn't win it, they were still very strong. They would do this thing where they would even go for lane swaps early on, and then they would gank into the lane swaps, so do that 3v1 kind of dive style, and that's something that we haven't really seen in maybe an entire season, back to season 4, in the early parts of season 4, where it was a little bit more popular, and it was popular with champions like Vi, so that may actually be what we're starting to see develop here. Mirror End is going to lock that in, and with champions like Syndra, if Syndra ever goes for a roam, just that double lockdown is going to be incredibly difficult to deal with, so I want to see a very strong, like, tanky top laner who can maybe deal with that. But Kale is also a good idea. If Kale can get up there to the top lane, this few seconds of invulnerability are a good way to avoid being dove. More interestingly, though, it has been locked in by Clover, and even though Kale could still go top lane, I'm expecting a jungle Kale. Now, I've seen jungle Kale out of the Turkish region, seen it out of, I think Dark Passage actually played that, Crystal, their jungler, played Kale. I've seen it out of the Brazilian region. We had it played by Keyed Stars, I believe, in their most recent Comic-Con league. But here is our chance to see the CIS play it. I think we also saw it a little bit played, maybe it was at IEM. If it was, then I'm remembering it correctly. If not, then don't hold it against me. But yeah, it's going to be a jungle Kale there for Clover. I really like the way that attack speed jungles carry through the current jungle. It's a little bit too difficult if you have to tank out a lot of the damage, but if you're ranged and you can wind up kiting it back and forth, that works out really well, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as we, you know, get a little bit further through picks and bans. I would expect to see something along the lines of either a Soraka for Graves, so that he can stay alive and healthy, because he does have to get a little bit closer to the fight. You can also go for a Janna and just give him a ton of extra attack damage with Eye of the Storm. But it does look like Soraka is going to be the pick, and Malphite, it's Hard Random, or at least Hard Random's the name up on the screen. I think it's actually Virtus.Pro playing. So, for Hard Random, yeah, going hard would have been good for them, but Vincent Vega locking in a Malphite for Power of Dreams. Holy cow. I always like the CIS Malphites because traditionally they build more ability power than the full tank Malphites that you'll see in North America. But I haven't watched Power of Dreams Malphite in a while, so we might change it up here. Because more likely than not, he'll be going up against Slayer, and up against Hedon, and of course he'll be playing Aurelia up there in the top lane. Unless they want to switch it around to a jungle Aurelia, I don't think that's very likely. So maybe you do want to go full tank Malphite and pick up something along the lines of like a Frozen Heart. Diving into a team fight with Malphite who has a Frozen Heart on it, it's going to work out really well, because not only is it going to slow the attack speed of your lane opponent in Aurelia, but it'll slow the attack speed of Kale coming out of the jungle and of Twitch too. So Malphite is a really good pick here just because he can still stack armor and be relatively effective. Now the downside of a Malphite is that if you can't do anything with your ultimate, then it's just not going to be effective because Malphites do tend to be a little bit more of an ult bot, champion that exists solely to use their ultimate in a team fight. And Tiki was thinking about going for a Zillion so that he could revive either Death Knight or Slayer or whoever got hit. And when you go for Zillion Kale, that's kind of like a save the dude comp, is what I like to call it. Because basically you're saying, hey, you're trying to blow up one guy on our team and either start a reset chain or just kill somebody. And so we need something to stop that. Invulnerability, great way to do it. Black Shield is also a good way to do it. Although I would have rather seen a Zillion maybe mid for Slayer so that you could just complete that. The ultimate way to do this is to have a hyper carry, AD carry like Vayne or Kog'Maw, or maybe even old school Tristana. And then you put a Lulu in the top lane, Kale mid, or a Kale jungle, Zillion mid, and then Morgana as the support player. You can also maybe put in a couple other shields or heals or something like that, because you just want to protect one person. And that's kind of what Renaissance are going for here, and we'll get a chance to see that as soon as we load back into the game. So stick around. We'll have Virtus.Pro versus Renaissance coming up in our last LOL Pro League game of the night. Once again, make sure to head over to lolpl.com or .org rather for more information on the LOL Pro League. And stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Summoner's Rift.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the LOL Pro League. We're back in our second game of the night, and after a defeat versus Hard Random, Renaissance are coming out against an arguably even stronger opponent. One of the best teams in the CIS region. It is Virtus.Pro. Now, Virtus.Pro have an all-star roster, at least as far as the CIS region is concerned, and more importantly, they've got picks that do what they've been just incredibly well known to do, and then it's just kind of the do dive motto. They pick a kind of hard engaged champions, and then they just say, well, you can't stop us from picking a fight on you. Push up a lane and then just go for huge dives. They got Vi, they've got a Malphite top lane, and they've got all the burst damage to follow it up with Graves and Syndra. You're just not really going to have a whole lot of HP against a team like that. Now, with that being said, the one way to counter out a burst composition like this is to put a lot of shields and sort of saving mechanics on your team. And that's exactly what Renaissance have done. So they've picked actually into this comp very, very well. They've got Ahri, who's very mobile and can dodge away from things like a Malphite ultimate. You've got Clover, who's going for jungle Kale. It's a little bit of a new pick for the jungle, but it actually does work out very, very well. And I said I'd talk about one of the reasons why it works out so well. As we can see, both teams just kind of being a little bit defensive as they spread out on the map. With the new jungle changes, the Hunter's Machete doesn't actually just give you flat damage increase. What it does is it gives you a damage over time effect that actually, yeah, sure, it does comparable damage. It keeps the creeps aggroing over and over again. So if you drop aggro, the damage over time proc from Hunter's Machete will tick, and then it'll send you, it'll aggro the camp back once you walk back into range. So for ranged champions, that's really, really good because you can keep kiting these camps back and forth, and soft resetting them so they don't actually deal all that much damage to you. Previously, you had to jungle something like a Teemo or a Twitch because they would be able to use their damage over time from their passives to keep the camp resetting, but now you've got the jungle item that does that for you. That's why things like Kikis's jungle Twisted Fate from yesterday's Until Extreme Masters games worked so well. Because you can keep resetting the aggro on the camps, and if you do that well early on, then you're gonna have a pretty good time in the jungle, even though it's maybe not quite as traditional jungle champion like Kale. So for right now, you can already see Virtus.Pro, they're winning out the bottom lane matchup, even just with Licrit walking forward with those Eye of the Storm empowered auto attacks. That extra AD, the shield to make sure she doesn't take too much damage, are helping her win her lane that matchup. Already a small CS advantage just off the back of that. The big difference, though, is that Death Knight, he has 3 CS. He's down 10 creep score. I'm not sure exactly if he just didn't CS early on, but I think he's just been getting harassed a little bit too much. So he's having a hard time getting close to them anyway. But you see Vincent Vega more than happy with just walking forward and starting that auto attack trade even without his support in lane. Speaking about even without his support in lane, Clover in the jungle is being forced off of his blue buff just because Licrit had the presence of mind to place an early ward in the jungle. And he realized, hey, Kale is not a high sustain jungler at all. Has almost no sustain other than just using Righteous Fervor on herself. So other than that, yeah, Kale's going to drop super low by the time she hits her second buff. And it was just a great realization by Licrit. Knew very early on where Clover was starting and said, hey, it's going to start to come down to the bottom half of the map for her second buff, and that's somewhere I can ward and then go push her off of it. And so Clover actually very far behind will still have hit level 3, but won't have that second buff. Whereas Mira's End has already picked up second buff, is going for the camp after that. We'll have that taken down before Clover can even clear his blue. So just a really, really good play there by Licrit. He's not only winning his own lane, he's helping his jungler out, and consequently, helping out the entire rest of the team. Now Slayer, even though this is still level 4, taking down to about half HP. If Fable can hit, or if Virtus.Pro can pick up enough damage, enough experience to hit level 6, then he's just going to one-shot him, so... At least generally across the map, you can see we talked about the hard engaged kind of team composition, but Virtus.Pro really need to hit level 6 before that comes into play. We're starting to get really close to their level 5 hit mid lane, top lane, and so they'll have that power spike coming in just one more level. Excited to see what they can do with that. With a flash forced out mid, that means that Virtus.Pro may not be quite as mobile, and that is an advantage that Slayer's Ahri has over him. Ahri, once she hits level 6, a lot more mobile, can go for roams top or bottom, and really try to snowball those lanes and maybe keep ahead of the game versus Virtus.Pro, and keep them from ever being able to just group up as 5 and try to go for these big all-in wombo combos that they're looking for. But overall, lanes seem to be losing just a little bit for Renaissance. They've had difficulties mid lane and top lane, and specifically bottom lanes, where that's really been hitting home. Death Knight and Tiki have already been forced back to base once, whereas that's the first recall back to base for Virtus.Pro. They come back in the lane with the tank stats on Janna, which almost guarantees that you're looking for either just a very aggressive trades or dives, and a pickaxe on Graves. And traditionally, a pickaxe is a very bad item to buy first on 80 carries because it really prevents you from stockpiling all the gold that you'll need to buy a BF sword, which is a big item for a lot of 80 carries. Now, Licrit, I like the way he's been playing the bottom lane just to allow Vincent Vega to keep his CS up and go for that big advantage, because he's already up about 20 CS. We're only 6.5 minutes into the game. So expect to see that lane go very, very well, and as the lanes start to win, the burst damage gets bigger, and off of level 6s, it's just going to be ridiculous how much burst damage Virtus.Pro are going to be able to put out here. Now we do have level 6 hit for top lanes, that are for mid lane as well. We might actually see a little bit more action heating up mid lane. Ahri is kind of waiting around the wings to see what she can pick up there. Kale in the area as well, clearing out some ward coverage. And overall, if you just look at ward coverage, there's not a lot of it out there. Top lane, nothing. Bottom lane, nothing. Or just a few wards placed around the dragon pit. And of course, one just put right behind the red buff. So we do have aggression going in bottom and mid lane, so a lot of action out there on the map. But overall, I gotta say, more impressed with duo lane. With Vincent Vega having grabbed the first kill of the game, of course, kills coming mid lane as well. It's kind of just exploding all over the place. Beautiful teleport there by Power of Dreams, who's able to come bottom. Even though he didn't pick up a kill, what he does do is solidify the advantage that Virtus.Pro have across the map. He knew he was already winning his lane top lane, so now he's coming to help another lane win. And it's very similar to what Liquid did earlier on when he went for the roam towards the blue buff to try to push Clover back to base, and he did that successfully. We had a great teleport from Power of Dreams, and overall, there's you can see the big difference, maybe not in the individual lanes, even though there is one there, but more is that Virtus.Pro are just helping each other a lot more, even this early on in the game. So we're going to come out of base now with 8 minutes on the clock, 2 kills on the board, and now double long swords picked up for both jungler and AD carry. And what that means is that both of them will be buying very early brutalizers. And brutalizer is a very snowbally item, because it gives you both stats and then stats that make those other stats effective. So you get attack damage, and then you get armor penetration to make that attack damage even more effective. Or effective at resisting it being resisted. Whatever. You guys get the idea. And as soon as they come out with those big items, almost guarantee expect them to just group up. The bottom lane kill there by Vincent Vega on a Twitch was just a reaction to Tiki not being in lane for him, and you can see the same situation mid lane, and you're probably gonna see a top lane here pretty soon where there's just too much burst for the very early on team to be able to deal with. And yeah, Peter Poker finally able to pick up that kill. 4 kills on the board here for Virtus.Pro already, and the problem is that they're coming from the burst damage lanes. It's the carries that are getting fed here for Virtus.Pro, and that means that, you know, maybe every other lane on the map loses for them. All they have to do is be meat shields and hard engaged tanks, and the damage is always going to be there. Virtus.Pro, they've got so much burst, and while they may have trouble dealing with things like Tiki's Black Shield, like the intervention ultimate from Clover, it's still going to be a difficult thing to deal with. Maybe you block out things like Malphite ult, like Graves or Syndra ult, so they don't have tons of burst damage, but they'll still have the ability to dish out consistent damage even still, whether it's just the orbs coming out of Syndra or the auto attack damage from very high DPS AD carry and Vincent Vega. I have a hard time. I never thought I'd be saying that I'd be casting Vincent Vega's games, but I guess I've progressed to that point in my shoutcasting career where even Vincent Vega puts up some pretty good numbers on the board. 2-0, and of course with that way 30 CS lead over Death Knight, who just really hasn't shown up very much. Now there's the all-in against Hedon, and that's exactly what we were talking about, just do-dive kind of mentality. Really, really tanky top laner with hard engage. That's Malphite, and he's got the backup from the now completely completed Berserker enchantment. At least I believe that there's it's not Juggernaut, I think it is Berserker there on Vi. So with that completed, the keep in mind he's going up against an attack speed based build from Clover, and while sure that comes with on hit damage, what it's not going to come with is just the straight up burst like we just saw from Mirror End. While Clover is going to try to help out on this dragon, he's just going to get taken down very, very low. Vincent Vega's just going to come up, and while he does have to dodge that, okay, well he didn't dodge the Dark Binding. The end result of that dragon fight is that Virtus.Pro come out a little bit further on top. They were the ones tanking in the beginning, but they were the ones who were able to finish up the job. You pick up a kill onto Death Knight, and more importantly, they don't even have to go for the dragon, because all they have to keep doing is denying Renaissance any opportunity to come back in the game. Because the longer, like, even just the lane phase stays around, the longer Virtus.Pro are going to have a lead. They're going to keep Mirror End actively, you know, trying to go for these all-in wombo combos. And even though he doesn't have a very low cooldown on his ultimate just yet, he's still able to, you know, put pressure on with Vault Breakers and You can't do that, you can just farm things up. And granted, that's the same thing that Clover's going to start doing, but at the same time, while Clover's busy farming it up, he can't protect his lanes. Turns out lanes don't need that much protection, as Slayer was able to pick up a nice 1v1 onto Virtus.Pro here, which is probably the most surprising part of this game for me. How you go from smashing your lane 3-0 and then dying to an 0-2 who's down 15 CS. That's a little bit questionable. But for now, it's take number 2 on the Dragon here, and it does look like this time it's a little bit more successful. Clover's able to pick that one up. It's the first Dragon of the game at about the 13-minute mark, and then an extra additional 8% attack damage and ability power. This is really going to help keep Renaissance in the game. Now, granted, it's not that actually that many stats early on. It's going to give you maybe like 5 or 6 extra ability power or attack damage. But what it does do is it means that as you continue to scale through the game, you just scale that much harder. And maybe you can't afford as many items as your opponents, and that scaling helps keep you a little bit more relevant and on even footing. The Dragon, unfortunately, now does not give quite as much global gold. Actually, doesn't give any global gold. You gotta be there in the Dragon Pit to pick that up. And that's not going to help decrease the gold difference, which is stacking up there. Virtus.Pro now about 4,000, 5,000 gold ahead. And at the 13-minute mark, that is actually fairly sizable. You can see that being the difference between like the tier of items being completed. No Trinity Force, but there, oh man, Hedon again is going to be in a rough spot. I don't know what those Transcendent Blades were supposed to be doing, but did go down. And that's 7-1 now on the score board again. And you can see the big difference here is that Irelia is going for damage items. He's trying to make these big, he's trying to be a source of damage for his team. But really, there's nobody on Renaissance who can tank right now. You've got a Kale who maybe okay, she has an intervention to stop a lot of this burst damage, but there's nobody that can actually take hits outside of that. The big engaged bottom lane was actually a good idea initially there by Renaissance, but they just didn't expect Virtus.Pro to be able to kite quite as well. The teleport was also really, really good, and so at the end of everything, sure, Slayer proves that he is still continuing to be a monster. He's got 100% of his team skills. But Virtus.Pro, they're making some pretty big statements too. They've got all the follow-up that they need, and honestly, without the ultimates to protect Renaissance, Virtus.Pro just have better damage. We already were talking about that a little bit earlier on. And so that's what made Slayer die there. It's why Clover died in the end. Just the ultimates, there's only so much you can rely on them to keep your guys alive, whether it's Ari's mobility or the intervention, like we said. So the snowball's starting to roll a little bit earlier than it did in the last game. I think first inhibitor fell at about 26 minutes in game number 1 versus hard random. So Renaissance now maybe a little bit further behind earlier. And of course, Virtus.Pro have shown very well coordinated gank attempts. They never try to go in for like 1v1 solo kills like Slayer was able to pick up on a Virtus.Pro here. It's always either in the duo lane or with a 2v1 advantage top lane. As Mirror End is actually ganked I think twice right now for Power of Dreams. He's already picked up Ninja Tabby and has a Sunfire Cape versus just an Irelia who's got 2 components of Trinity Force. I don't know about that. It's going to be rough for Hedon to try to do something. Lanes that will not be rough to try to do something include bottom and mid, where with a Deathfire Grasp completed for Virtus.Pro here, and almost an Infinity Edge there for Vincent Vega. We talked about how strong their burst damage was and how essential it was to the team fight a little bit earlier on, and now it's just going to be even more magnified. All it's going to take is for a Mirror End to just walk top lane, dive underneath turret with Power of Dreams. They can keep diving Hedon as much as they want to. However, it's probably a better idea to start taking turrets or major objectives with it at this point in the game. Because you're starting to find that, okay, well, maybe you're strong in lane phase, but anytime teams group up 5-on-5, it doesn't matter if you've won your lane, it's about how you play those team fights. And we're talking about that possibility where you just run top lane and dive. That's exactly what happens. So, and it's honestly probably going to be happening a lot more. Slayer dashes towards the intervention. Intervention runs out, and that means that things could be turning around here. Exhaust, though, was a very key component of that last team fight. It allowed Slayer to dive in for a couple more kills. Now, 3 out of 4 of his team's kills, but you can't discount Tickley. He was able to get in there for one of his own, and I mean, maybe his support's not the best player to pick up a kill on, but gotta stay careful. And against Vincent Vega, that was not something that Renaissance were able to do. He just walks forward, blows him up, and he's gonna do the same thing over and over again. He finally has picked up that Infinity Edge that we were talking about, and we were talking about big damage carry items. You don't necessarily expect to see those on supports, but with Licorice having picked up the new and improved Medjai's Soul Stealer, it starts with 5 stacks now, so it's almost always going to be effective when you buy it, but the downside is that it's even more of a snowball item. When you die with the new Medjai's Soul Stealers, you actually lose half your stacks instead of just a third of them. So if you start to die, maybe you only have like 1 or 2 deaths before it just becomes really cost ineffective, and you realize you're probably never going to stack that Medjai's up quite as much as you would have earlier. Death Knight's been trying to go for these sneaky snipe plays as much as he could before, but unfortunately, I don't think Twitch assassinations are really going to be the way that Renaissance win this game. They have a 0-3 Twitch, so maybe that's a big difference. And while he was behind only like 10 or 20 CS in lane, now that the lane phase is kind of ended, he loses that ability to pick up that accurate CS just because Twitch doesn't have very good wave clear, whereas Graves can just buckshot the wave. And you can already see that leading him up to like a 70 CS lead here at the 18-minute mark. And that starts to become even more and more overwhelming as the game progresses. You can just look at the item difference. Half a completed Blade of the Ruined King versus a Graves that's even looking for a Brutalizer here. And so with Virtus.Pro just starting to group up around major objectives, that's what's given them this 4-0 turret lead and the ability to go for a pickup on Dragon if that is what they need. Or at least what they choose to go for. And there it goes. It's been picked up by Mirror End. He's grabbing his team the 2nd Dragon in a row, so they can deal more damage to minions and monsters. Virtus.Pro here, though, he's actually not even caring about being with the rest of his team, which is maybe a little bit sloppy from a team play perspective, but Virtus.Pro can just follow up, go for these follow-up kills. They're so tanky that it probably doesn't necessarily matter all that much. At least as far as their team fighting is concerned. You can just see the item differential so visible in these fights as, you know, maybe Death Knight can get away because he has stealth, but the rest of his team aren't quite so lucky. Because what happened in that last team fight was he just stealthed and then ran away, and the rest of his team's like, dude, we can't turn invisible. And he's like, well, that's highly unfortunate. And then, of course, the rest of Renaissance die, and it's looking like Virtus.Pro are turning this into the Dark Ages. The Renaissance won't be coming up for quite a while. VP heading back to base for what is, I have to feel, one of their last trips to buy for this game. They've got Deathfire Grass, so there's got cooldown reduction, defensive, offensive stats, everything you could possibly ask for. The biggest buy off of that back was, well, I guess you can say there's 2. There's the Yomu's Ghost Blade, completed for Vincent Vega, so he's going to be going for a little bit more of a hard carry, atypical Graves build. Well, that is becoming a little bit more typical, just because you get extra armor pen out of that. And of course you have the Abyssal Scepter, now completed for Power of Dreams. It's not only going to help him out, but also the magic damage coming out of, you know, the Medjai's Soul Stealer Janna, which I have a feeling is going to start to get pretty stacked here. And of course Virtus.Pro here, who's gone for a little bit more CDR. From a Morellonomicon second. Now, Morellonomicon, an interesting item because the only unique stats on it are the Grievous Wounds. So you actually do get 40% CDR if, spoiler alert, you buy 2 Morellonomicons. And that's actually what we saw yesterday from Bjergsen, who did that on TSM versus Unicorns of Love in Intel Extreme Masters. I was there watching it, and as soon as he buys the second one, you could hear like a collective question mark from the crowd. It's like, what's going on there? And I think that's kind of the same situation that Renaissance are wondering about in the mid lane, as Double Kill came in there for Virtus.Pro here. Same situation top lane, although this time it's Power of Dreams, maybe looking for a turnaround. You will get some help there from Mirror's End, and of course you can't really expect all that many good things to come about when you are this far behind. Licorice even stacking up his Medjai's a little bit more there, and it's just going from bad to worse. Virtus.Pro, very dominant showing here. Medjai's getting some stacks on it, and just more items than Virtus.Pro really need at this point. They're going to siege up the turret, going for the burst behind it even still, and they're going to be able to take down not only their 6 outer turrets, but now their 7th and first inner turret of the game. They're protecting that inhibitor, which should actually go down here in not too long. You got once again Death Knight trying for these assassinations. They just don't work. So Virtus.Pro will be able to pick up their first inhibitor of the game here at a 22-minute mark or thereabouts, and that's about 4 minutes more quickly than they were able to pick it up in game number 1, or that hard random. Picked it up in game number 1 versus Renaissance. So even though we are past the 20-minute mark, Renaissance still fighting this one out. Still have yet to win a game currently in the LoL Pro League, and you can see this is maybe some of the reasons why. They have trouble grouping up early, going for those big teleport plays, and more importantly, their lanes, specifically Death Knight, just do not have quite the same power as the lanes that they're facing up against. An attempt at chasing things out isn't going to end well, and Virtus.Pro, they might even just be able to re-push on into that. We'll have to keep an eye on that, even still. But yeah, they've got stronger laners in almost every single category, and really not a whole lot left to say about that, other than just you know, Virtus.Pro. They overextended a little bit for that siege on the inhibitor. They took the inhibitor and should have just backed out, but they wound up actually turning around and trying for a little bit more. Got too greedy and wound up giving up a few kills, but the score is still 21-6. So at some point you kind of have to ask yourself, you know, when is the game over? And I think it may be a little bit closer now that you know, things like Power of Dreams in there picking up kills, and you know, Clover and Death Knight were trying for like one of the longest chases in League of Legends. They walked all the way out of base, all the way up top lane, dove the top lane turret, and still were unable to pick up Liquid. And then Mirror End tried to come in and clean up at the end, but couldn't quite pick up any extra kills. Although 0-5 for the top lane, 0-4 in the jungle, and only a 1-4-80 carry score. Renaissance, I don't know. I thought I was expecting to see things like, you know, Mozart and other, you know, great Renaissance artists, but maybe they have yet to come out here. I was also going to make a Civilization 5 reference about that, but then I realized that it was probably the wrong game, and I spend way too much time playing that anyway. It's starting to leak into my other casting. I was casting a different game yesterday, and I was thinking to myself, you know what? I totally have a Civ 5 analogy for this. Trying to keep it to League of Legends here, and we may not be keeping it here for very much longer, as Virtus.Pro, they've taken down their first inhib, looking to push both side lanes, although we'll look probably for that bottom turret as their next big objective. Of course, if you do take down the bottom lane turret and or inhibitor, it makes it just that much more easy to walk straight to Baron afterwards, because your opponents have to take care of an inhibitor that is as far away as possible. Keep those super minions from pushing in. Virtus.Pro, they're just going for the siege, going to look for long-range stuns, initiates behind the turret, and the takedown of their second base turret of the game. Engaged in hard fights through the back behind the turret are just going to be overwhelmingly Virtus.Pro. They're going to go for the big dives, and of course it will reward them equally as well. Clover, last standing member alive for Renaissance, and Virtus.Pro just gonna crush this inhibitor in, and probably the base turrets to follow. So this should be the end of the game unless they don't close this out quickly enough. But yeah, Virtus.Pro, they're gonna come in here and try to close things out, and you gotta give a lot of congratulations to these guys. 26-7, a very, very dominant skill score, and we're actually only like 25-26 minutes into the game, and they're still able to come in here and make it look good. So congratulations to Virtus.Pro. They are your victors here in our second game of the night with a 26-7 victory over Renaissance. Renaissance still winless in the LPL, and that means that Virtus.Pro will get one more shot up towards the top of the standings. If you guys want more info on the standings, on the results, more info, head over to lolpl.org, or if you want stats, you can head over to lolpl.org/results. And of course, make sure to follow them on Facebook and Twitter. You can see their links up there on the screen all during the stream. But I think that is it for me. Let me check really quickly to see if we have any more matches coming up tonight. and I'll see if I can get back to you guys with that info. But it looks like that is going to be all for us for this evening. So make sure to follow all the links that you see right there. I do want to once again thank you guys for tuning in. My name is Rapid. I hope you guys have enjoyed the casting. Has been a little bit of a delay, but I hope you guys still enjoyed the streams. So on behalf of myself, our production crew, and all of you for watching, thank you so much, and have a good night.